I remember being in an empty showroom watching the news and, not having the maturity that maybe we have now, 12 years ago was a long time ago, and allowing our minds not to be strong and allowing ourselves to buy into that stuff. And I think that I know that a lot of people are in that same mindset now. I know that those challenges there. And that's funny. That's what me and Smith were talking about before you came on about these shows. And I told him, I said, listen, I'm not a great self-promoter. It's me and you, it's never been my thing. I've always tried to just generate opportunities in business and help us grow. And you took the point of promoting and everybody has their strengths, and that's not one of mine. So I was telling him, though, I said, I don't mind taking this time each week, because when I was really at the bottom and I was running the dealership, I don't want to say it was an impossible situation, because if I was there now, I would do things different. But it was a Mitsubishi store, and it was a tough situation. And in that store, when I was first hired there, they had been averaging 30 cars a month and losing money for 2 years. In my first month at the store, we sold 110 cars, and the store made more money in 1 month than it had made in the prior 3 to 4 years of profit. And the next month, I did the same thing. And then the third month, the comptroller of the big dealer group basically said none of the numbers made sense. If you tried to manage that store by a composite, that I was doing everything wrong. And if I had all these things in these guidelines, then the store would make, $200,000 a month instead of $100,000. But he didn't understand that store could never be operated as a normal store. So we started operating it under his guidelines, because he owned the store, and I had to do what I was told to do at that point in time because of fear, and because of fear of paycheck, fear of stability. And I did not have power to control my situation there, because I didn't know how to. I didn't know that I could have the power to control it. And I let that company tell me how to run my business and control me. And I failed and failed and failed and failed, to the point where you become depressed. No one, if you work for somebody you really care about, you don't want to let them down every month and have to go look them in the eye and say, hey, I'm sorry, I lost money again. But you can't say I lost money because I did it the way you wanted. If you let me do it the way I know how to do it, and so I was young. I mean, and just that was hard. So during that time is when I would go to YouTube and look for inspiration. I go to YouTube and look for motivational stuff, look for things that could help me. And I come across a old speech from Og Mandino, and Og was it was like a 1 hour YouTube thing with several parts, and that brought me out of that gutter, and it put me back on the right path. Was able to turn that store around and then leave that store for better opportunities. All from a 1 hour, YouTube video. So if maybe someone's in that situation and they come across Billy, one of our conversations, and it can change and help that person, then it's worth it to me. Then, it makes it all worth it.
100%. So let's do just that. Let's give someone the opportunity to empower themselves, because you can take control of your financial situation. You can take control of your future. Okay. And you have to be properly educated. So what can we do, Caleb? Give us some, maybe you have an outline. What do you want to talk about today that can actually improve someone's future?
Okay. Yeah. So what I'll talk about today is creating power and stability for yourself by learning to keep people dependent on you. Okay. So that's what I want to talk about today. And you can cut, you may have to break in some, because I actually, I always try to do an outline, so I had some stories and things. But I believe that the ultimate power in life and business is having the ability to get people to do things for you without using force. And I think that's where that power comes from. And the stability part is being able to maintain your independence. But to do that, you always have to be needed and wanted. And the more you're relied upon, the more freedom you have. And that's what I didn't have before, is I did not have that freedom, because I did not create the reliance upon myself because I didn't know how to do it. So I thought, what better way than to talk about that today and maybe teach some guys some things they could do to create that ability to have that power. So one thing in my office, if you come in, you'll notice there's no TVs, and that's because I try not to have access to just negative stuff all day. But I like to read a lot, and my bookshelves are full of things. And I think a man, and we become domesticated, right? And I know you. One of my favorite stories about you, Billy, was when I first met you with Derek, and you were doing jujitsu, but your trainer was YouTube. That you watched all kinds of YouTube videos on jiu-jitsu and then went and won a meet, And I thought, and Derek was telling me about that. I thought that was really cool. Because men like to be primal in a sort, and we don't get to do that really anymore because we've been domesticated. But, I think we talk about the battles of life, and that, everything we do can still be looked at in a militaristic or a battle type format. And, what better way to describe a general manager or even a salesperson? This is more general manager geared usually when I'm talking, but what better way to describe them than as a mercenary? Because they're brought into a battle by a king who owns the land. They're hired to fight for that king and to win that battle in that store. So, I think if you think about it like that, you'll see that it is true. But, one thing about being a mercenary, for someone is you've got to become so powerful that they cannot live without you. So there's a story about that where in the 1400s in Venice, they were at war with Florence, and they brought in a mercenary leader. And that guy come in, and he ended up winning the battle for them. Well, he won the battle, and all the people praised him more so than the king. And for years went by, and they praised him. He became, someone that they almost worshipped as saving them, giving them independence, giving them prosperity, because he went on to lead them in other things besides battle. He went on to lead them in other matters of the state. And it come to a point where the king invited him to a dinner one night. And as he was going to that dinner, he realized that he was going the wrong way. And he was walked across a bridge that he knew led to a dungeon. And they took him in, they prosecuted him with no trial, and they beheaded him because the king realized he could hire a younger, stronger mercenary to come in and do the same job because he had not made himself where he could not be replaced. All right. And that is the fate of someone who does not learn how to become so unique and so dependent upon that they cannot find a replacement for them. And a second story to that is King Louis the 11th, I think they called him the Spider King. He was really big into astronomy, and he had a lot of astronomers that he kept in his court. And so he would always study the stars, and he would ask them questions. Well, one guy in the court told him, Billy, he said that a woman that the king liked was going to die in 8 days. So 8 days goes by, and the woman dies. And King Louis says, well, he doesn't know if the guy was just right or did he kill her. But either way, the guy was dangerous, because if he was right, he thought he was some kind of demon, and if he was wrong, but he killed her, he was too dangerous to have around. So King Louis invited him up to his room, and he told all the guards, he said, when I give the signal, the signal, I want you guys to grab him and throw him out the window and kill him. So the guy comes up the stairs, and King Louis asked him, he said, he started to give the signal, but first he said, I'm going to ask you a question. He said, if you know so much, when will you die? And I said, I will die 3 days before you do. Well, he never gave the signal. He never gave the signal to kill him. And he ended up keeping the man in the court. He lavished him with gifts. He took care of him. And the man actually lived about 4 years after King Louis died, but he was rewarded and taken care of for the rest of his life because he wasn't sure if he could live without him or not.
Yeah.
And that's just two sides of one guy who knew what to say, one guy that knew how to operate, who was then given security, stability, and power, and another guy who was powerful and knew how to do something, but he did not know how to make himself where he could not be replaced in any way, right? So that's what I was going to kind of talk about, is how do you become the guy? How do you become that astrologer? And how do you keep from becoming the mercenary that had his head chopped off, right?
All right.
So one more, and then I'll get into it, was everyone knows Michelangelo, the artist, not the Ninja Turtle. And he was commissioned to build Pope Julius II. He was commissioned to build his tomb, and they got in an argument. They got in an argument about it, and Michelangelo said, "Listen, you can't find anyone as good as me, but I can find plenty of people to build this tomb for." And he knew that Michelangelo was right. And he doubled the pay. He did everything he could to keep him there, because he knew that without getting rid of him would cause him not to be able to have something that he wanted to have, and there was no way he could replace it. So that, just like I said, that just goes back to what I was talking about. That just, the ultimate power comes from being able to get what you want to have without forcing people to do stuff. And then as a general manager, how do we do that? And what Michelangelo said is that if you lack the talent to be unreplaceable, then you better not lack the skills to be unreplaceable. And so while you can't maybe learn talent, Billy, you can learn skills. And so that's why, like I said, I had some skills laid out to give GMs, but you got any comments on just that and in general, just what we're talking about, just how a general manager, can play into that? Absolutely.
And, I think that there's definitely levels to this. What you're talking about is leadership. If you can add enough value to the people that you are leading, or that if you can get results, you and I both have went into these dealerships, taken over underperforming stores and made them overperforming stores. And, sometimes, just like you, Caleb, you were at that wrong store. If you build a legacy, even, or if you have a reputation for taking stores to another level, and if you have, this is one thing that's maybe a little deeper, or maybe just a different way of making yourself irreplaceable. It's very hard to duplicate in someone all the skills and the tools that you have. But if you go into, and I've seen you do it, I've seen you in person, give your staff, give the salespeople everything that you have. So basically you're giving them all of your secrets. You're actually providing them with the tools and the specialized knowledge to actually replace you, Right. Very rarely do they do it. But and in doing that, though, if you're able to duplicate in others, maybe up to 70, 80% of what you can do, sometimes what happens is you'll build and train your replacement. But what that does, you'll leave that Mitsubishi store and end up at a Toyota store. So, I don't want to send the wrong message to people, because what you're saying is not a fear mentality. It's not, hey, I'm irreplaceable, you can't replace me. The reason you're not replaceable is because you're going to give everything you have and train those people to give them everything that they have, where they could actually, if they would put in the 10X action, if they'll read a book a week, they'll study all these things you're talking about. So what you're teaching right now is true leadership of how you can replace yourself. And generally what happens, like you say, they're going to do whatever it takes to keep you if you are that kind of leader.